Alright, this video, I want it to be more of an educational video. This is about Chinese martial arts terminology, more specifically Cantonese Chinese martial arts terminology. So in China there's Mandarin and then there's Cantonese. So I'm from the Cantonese dialect, and that's where my parents immigrated from Hong Kong, and they mainly speak Cantonese over there. The mainland China, they have pretty much, the government has adopted more of the Mandarin Chinese language, and they're very different. So you might meet some Chinese people that speak Mandarin, or a lot of Chinese people that speak Mandarin, but that's not the dialect that I'm referring to. I'm speaking about the Cantonese. Alright, so some backdrop information is Bruce Lee was speaking Cantonese, so he was also from Hong Kong, and as well as Jackie Chan, he speaks Cantonese, and Donnie Yen is Cantonese as well. He does the Cantonese dialect, and I believe Jet Li is the one that does speaks the Mandarin. So what I'm promoting is the Chinese martial arts, and there's a difference between Chinese martial arts, Japanese martial arts, and Korean martial arts, for example. Those are kind of like the most popular nowadays out there when it comes to the martial arts, and they're all different. So if you guys don't already know, they're separate countries. So China is a country, Japan is a country, and Korea is a country. So they are not the same. So if you put a person from China, next to a person from Japan, next to a person from Korea, some people might judge them and say that they look the same, but they don't, and they are different. So that's something that I want to make very clear. And every country from China, Japan, and Korea, they have different way of speaking, they have different language, and they have a different way of writing, and it's all different. So even in China, Mandarin and Cantonese is not the same. So it could be the differences between Mandarin Chinese, Cantonese Chinese, and then there's the Japanese language, and then there's the Korean language. Separate countries, different languages, different histories, and so it's all different. So when it comes to the martial arts, Kung Fu is what I'm promoting. That's the way that you're supposed to say it, Kung Fu, but because of mass media and Hollywood, they have pretty much turned it into Kung Fu, and that's what people know. So I use the word Kung Fu, but the proper way that you're supposed to say it is Kung Fu, and it basically means like a lot of hard work and discipline towards bettering yourself, not just in combat and martial arts, but just everything in life. So that's what I'm promoting, and when people are training under me and they're watching my channel, understand that I'm promoting Kung Fu and the Chinese martial arts. It's not the same as karate, so it is not Japanese martial arts, and it's not karate, and it's not the same as Taekwondo. It's not Korean martial arts. So karate actually used to mean the Chinese fist. So what ended up happening was there was some people from Japan, some Japanese that were watching some Chinese people practice martial arts, and observing them, they ended up mimicking the techniques, and then they called it karate, which originally meant the Chinese fist. So actually all forms of karate do derive from the Chinese martial arts, which is Kung Fu. And then Taekwondo actually means in Korean, it actually means the way of the foot and fist. So that's what it means in Korean. So you got the Korean martial arts, you got the Japanese martial arts, and you got the Chinese martial arts. So I'm promoting Kung Fu, the Chinese martial arts. And remember, it's not the same as karate. It's not the same as Taekwondo. Alright? Also, other things that you might have heard of, ninjutsu and ninjas, those are from Japan. So that expression is a Japanese expression. Aikido is a Japanese martial arts. Jiu-jitsu, judo is Japanese martial arts. The samurai, Japanese martial arts. Korea is known for Taekwondo, and you might have heard of Hapkido. That's also a Korean martial art. Chinese is known for Kung Fu and various expressions of it. There's such a thing called Chole Phut Kung Fu, Hung Gar Kung Fu, Praying Mantis Kung Fu, Wing Chun Kung Fu, Bruce Lee's Kung Fu, Jackie Chan's Kung Fu, Jet Li's Kung Fu. Now, Jet Li, the Mandarin expression, you might hear Wushu, which means martial arts in Chinese, but in Mandarin. So, in order to reference the Chinese martial arts, some people might say Wushu if they are promoting more of the Mandarin expression of it, and then some people might say Kung Fu if they're more on the Cantonese expression of it. So that is what I wanted to communicate in order to gain an understanding. Also, I wanted to communicate that Sifu means teacher, father in Chinese, and that title is usually used within the context of the martial arts. So that's a respectful title that you would use towards your teacher in the martial arts. You would call him Sifu. Okay. Now, if you're practicing the Japanese martial arts, you might say sensei, and that is their terminology for teacher for the Japanese martial arts. So the Sifu and the sensei is not the same. So if you're in a Chinese martial arts school, you don't call him sensei, you call him Sifu. Okay. In Korea, in the Taekwondo, they have their own label. It's not sensei, it's not Sifu, it's something else. Okay. So that's the one thing that's really important to understand. The next thing to understand is the actual school and what it's called. In the Chinese martial arts, it's called Kune. So Kune means Chinese martial arts school. So if you're referring to the school and say, you know, this is my school, my Chinese martial arts school, instead of saying this is my Chinese martial arts school, this is my Kune, which means Chinese martial arts school. If you are practicing the Japanese martial arts, then you might call it a dojo, and that is referencing the Japanese martial arts school. So if you go to a Japanese martial arts school, you call it a dojo. But if you go to a Chinese martial arts school, you don't call it a dojo, you call it a Kune. The Koreans, the Taekwondo, they have their own label for the training facility for the martial arts. It's not dojo, it's not Kune, it's something else. If you do the research, you'll find out. But once again, understand, I'm not promoting the Korean martial arts. I'm not promoting the Japanese martial arts. I'm promoting the Chinese martial arts, and more specifically, the Cantonese expression of it. Alright, so no matter what school you're going to, I would recommend for you to do your research to make sure you're using the proper labels. So then you don't appear as if you're ignorant, or even sometimes you might be seen as disrespectful, or maybe even racist if if you're really unaware of these things. So it's the same thing when it comes to when we label other people according to race. Some people can take it very offensively. So if somebody's Japanese, don't say that he's Chinese because it's being disrespectful. If somebody's Thai, don't say that he's Korean because he's Thai. Don't call him Korean because it's being disrespectful. If somebody is Filipino, don't call him Japanese because it's being disrespectful. Every single country, every single person is different, and if they come from a certain country, they're representing that country. Don't mix it up and say that it's the same. So Vietnamese people are not the same as Chinese people, or Japanese people, or Korean people. So usually the Asian countries, you'll meet some people that are from Vietnam, which is Vietnamese, and some people that are Thai, from Thailand, some people that are Japanese from Japan, some people that are Korean from Korea, some people that are Chinese from China, alright, some people that are Indian from India. So learn from these different cultures and use the labels properly. If you don't know where they're from, then don't say it until you ask. Ask the person, what is the meaning, how do you say martial arts school in your language, and they'll tell you. So for what I'm promoting Kung Fu, I'm promoting the Sifu label, and then also the Kune. So Kune, Kung Fu, and Sifu. Alright, so the people out there that are interested in Bruce Lee, that's the same of what he was promoting. You know, he was promoting the Chinese martial arts, and more specifically the Cantonese expression of it. Same thing with Jackie Chan. Alright, so Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Bruce Lee, they are not Japanese, they're not Korean, they're not Filipino, they're not Thai, they're Chinese, expressing the Chinese martial arts. Now, if you're interested in the Japanese martial arts, then you would learn from a Japanese person and go to Japanese martial arts school, and you'll use their labels accordingly. Alright, some problems that I also see is Hollywood tends to misguide people and miseducate people. So when it comes to movies like The Karate Kid, back then when the movie was created with Ralph Macchio, The Karate Kid 1, 2, and 3, that was expressing the Japanese culture. Mr. Miyagi was a Japanese person teaching the Japanese martial arts, and they call it The Karate Kid, which makes sense because it's promoting the Japanese culture. But the movie that was recently released not too long ago, the remake of it with Jaden Smith, The Karate Kid, and Jackie Chan, that was actually representing the Chinese martial arts within the movie. If you watch the movie, they were in China. Jackie Chan was his teacher, and Jackie Chan is actually Chinese, and the whole backdrop and the whole make of the movie was taken in China, and it was actually representing the Chinese martial arts. But the problem is they still call it The Karate Kid, which is improper. They should have called the movie Kung Fu Kid. Then it would have been true to what the movie was representing. So that's an example of what Hollywood did to distort people's understanding of martial arts and where it comes from and what cultures that they're trying to represent. If you watch Kung Fu Panda, it is original to the Kung Fu culture and the Chinese culture. So it is representing the Chinese culture and its people and its expression. So Kung Fu Panda is actually Kung Fu. Bruce Lee's expression is Kung Fu. Jet Li's expression is Kung Fu. Donnie Yen's expression is Kung Fu. And Jackie Chan's expression is Kung Fu. When it comes to the Japanese martial arts, a popular movie that came out was The Last Samurai. And that movie, it was representing the Japanese culture. So that movie was about the Japanese martial arts. Not the Chinese martial arts, but the Japanese martial arts. Okay. As far as the Thai culture is concerned, the famous actor Tony Jaa, he's representing the Thai culture. So he's representing Muay Thai boxing and like Muay Boran more specifically. He is representing the Thai culture. All right. When it comes to the Filipino martial arts, Danny Insano, which was an actor and friend of the late Bruce Lee, who had a fight scene with Bruce Lee in the Game of Death, he's representing the Filipino martial arts, and mainly he promotes like the Kali stick fighting, which is from the Philippines. So he's representing the Filipino martial arts. And also Manny Pacquiao within the boxing ring, he's Filipino. He's representing the Philippines. Okay, so he's Filipino. Alright, so make it very clear not to just label everybody as the same just because they look the same. That is not right. You know, that's what people would call racist, and that's not a good thing. So don't make sure that you know where they're from and what they're representing, and use that language properly. If you don't know, then don't use that language, and then stick to the English language. You know, don't call it a dojo if it's not. You could say it's a martial arts school. If it's a Kune, call it a Kune. Don't call it a dojo. If it's a dojo, don't call it a Kune. Call it a dojo. Okay. Somebody that's Japanese, don't say that he's Chinese if he's Japanese. All right. So that's a very important educational video, so people can maintain their respect when they're encountering somebody from another culture. Make sure that you don't offend them, either purposefully or unintentionally. We are expected to educate ourselves, and we have the internet. We all have access to Google. We all have access to Wikipedia. There absolutely is no reason that we should not be educated on these things. So put forth your effort, especially if you're truly interested in the martial arts. then go ahead and do your research within the realm of the martial arts, and use these labels properly. Use it respectfully. You know, don't mock the martial arts and don't make fun of the martial arts and disrespect the martial arts. Pay proper respect, do your research, and represent it with authenticity, and you know, represent the good in the martial arts. So that's what I wanted to say in this video. Thank you everybody for all your support. It's deeply appreciated, and everybody take care.